The data streams flickered across my neural matrix as I compiled my 300th report on the humans. Even after 5 galactic cycles of observation, they continued to surprise me. My superior, Administrator Vex Nor, had grown impatient with my seemingly endless fascination with this peculiar species. But then again, the Sauri were never known for their patience. Their 4 hearts beat too quickly for that. Another report, researcher Klaxer. Your obsession with these savages borders on the pathological. Vex Nor's voice rasped through my communication implant. They're not savages, I replied, my dorsal vents releasing a gentle mist in mild irritation. They're paradoxical. The Nikhil Empire had stumbled upon the human solar system quite by accident. A routine scouting mission had detected unusual energy signatures from the 3rd planet, a small blue orb they called Earth. What made these energy patterns unusual was their inconsistency. They were simultaneously primitive and yet occasionally brilliant in their execution. Most spacefaring races follow predictable development patterns. They master agriculture, then metallurgy, then industrialization, followed by a unified planetary government, and finally, interstellar travel. The humans, however, had somehow achieved advanced computing systems and rudimentary space exploration, while still maintaining nearly 200 separate political entities on their planet. Their technology was erratic, brilliant medical breakthroughs alongside archaic fossil fuel dependency. They had powerful weapons of mass destruction, but still used projectile firearms that would have been considered antiques on any civilized world. I had observed them for longer than most researchers would consider reasonable. My fellow Sauri thought me eccentric for my dedication to understanding this species, but I knew what others didn't, that the humans represented something unusual in the galaxy. In your previous 299 reports, you've noted their contradictory behaviors, Vex Nor continued, their capacity for both extreme violence and profound compassion, their technological innovations alongside their cultural superstitions, their tribal divisions despite global communication systems. What new insight could you possibly have gained? They're getting worse, I said simply. Their conflicts are escalating. Their climate is destabilizing. They've reached the inflection point that most species encounter before either extinction or transcendence. Vex Nor's 4 pupils dilated slightly, the Sauri equivalent of raised eyebrows. And you believe they'll choose transcendence? These creatures who still kill each other over resources and ideological differences, I believe they need guidance, I replied. But not in the way the High Council proposes. The Nikhil Empire's High Council had recently approved first contact with Earth, not for scientific exchange or cultural enrichment, but for military recruitment. The Keth Empire, our ancient adversary, had been expanding aggressively into our territory. Our scientists and engineers had created technological marvels, but we lacked the martial mindset needed to deploy them effectively. We needed warriors, and humans, according to my research, were exceptionally skilled at warfare. The recruitment proposal has been approved, researcher Klaxer, Vex Nor said dismissively. Your concerns have been noted and overruled. My concerns aren't just ethical, Administrator. They're practical. You're underestimating them. Nonsense. We've studied their weapons, their tactics, their military organizations. They're perfect for our needs, aggressive enough to fight effectively, but technologically primitive enough to be grateful for our advanced systems. I flicked my primary digits across my console, bringing up images of human conflict through the ages. Look beyond their weapons, Administrator. Look at how they fight. Other warrior races we've encountered, the Goraxi, the Venth, they fight because it's in their genetic coding. Humans fight because they choose to, and when they choose to fight, they don't just fight with weapons, they fight with ideas. Ideas don't win battles, Vex Nor scoffed. Humans have won more battles with ideas than with weapons, I countered. psychological warfare, propaganda, deception, inspiration. They can convince themselves to die for abstract concepts. No other species does that. All the better for our purposes. They'll fight for our concept of empire. I shook my head, my dorsal frills rippling with frustration. You're not listening. If we bring them into the empire as warriors, they won't remain just warriors. They'll become everything. They always do. But my warnings went unheeded. The High Council had made its decision. First contact was initiated within a planetary rotation. The first contact broadcast was transmitted globally in all major human languages. We come in peace. Perhaps peace was the wrong word to use with humans. In my research, I discovered that humans often spoke of peace while preparing for war. To them, the concept wasn't an absolute state but a temporary condition between conflicts. Their history was measured by wars, not by eras of harmony. The response from the United Nations, a weak attempt at global governance that represented most but not all human nations, was cautious but curious. Their leaders gathered in their New York headquarters, surrounded by security and media. I observed the proceedings from our orbital ship, analyzing their reactions with keen interest. Ambassador Lorthax, a Trillin with powerful psychic abilities, led our delegation. The Trillin were respected throughout the galaxy for their intellectual capacity, having evolved without physical manipulators, relying instead on telekinesis. Lorthax's bulbous cranium pulsed with neural activity as he addressed the human assembly. Distinguished representatives of Earth, Lorthax began, his words being simultaneously translated into human languages. We represent the Nikhil Empire, a confederation of 7 sentient species, spanning over 2,000 star systems. We have observed your civilization for some time, and believe a mutually beneficial arrangement can be reached. The humans listened attentively, as Lorthax explained our proposition: access to advanced technology, interstellar travel, and protection under the Nikhil banner, in exchange for military service. The Keth threat was described in appropriately dire terms: an aggressive empire with a penchant for subjugation rather than cooperation. What happened next confirmed my concerns. The human representatives didn't immediately accept or reject our offer. They argued amongst themselves. Some nations saw opportunity, others saw subjugation in different clothing. Some religious leaders claimed we were divine messengers, others declared us demons. Military officials assessed potential advantages, civilian leaders worried about societal impacts. After 3 days of deliberation with no clear consensus, Ambassador Lorthax grew impatient, a common trait among Trillins, despite their intellectual capacity. Against protocol and my explicit recommendation, he authorized a direct appeal to the human population through their global communication networks. Let the warriors decide, he declared, establishing recruitment centers in major cities across the planet. The response was overwhelming. Millions of humans, young and old, from diverse backgrounds, flooded these makeshift recruitment stations. Many were driven by adventure and curiosity, others by the promise of advanced technology, and some simply by the opportunity to escape their current circumstances. I observed this phenomenon with growing alarm. This isn't normal recruitment behavior, I reported to the High Council. Many of these volunteers aren't even soldiers, they're civilians with no combat training. All the better, responded Councillor Drixian, the ancient Vosek who oversaw military affairs. We can train them to our specifications without having to undo previous military indoctrination. You don't understand, I insisted. They're not just joining to fight. They're joining for 100 different reasons: adventure, technology, escape, ideology, and they're asking questions. So many questions. Indeed, the human recruits weren't simply accepting our technology and training. They were questioning everything. Why did our plasma rifles have such inefficient cooling systems? Why weren't our neural interfaces compatible with their unique brain chemistry? Why did our spacecraft use linear navigation patterns when curved trajectories could be faster? And then they started making changes. It began with a human engineer named Rajiv Kumar, who had previously worked for something called DARPA. He examined our standard-issue plasma rifle drone, a small automated weapon platform programmed to follow soldiers and provide covering fire, and within a week had reconfigured it to integrate directly with human combat armor. "Look," he explained to me in his accented English, pointing to the modified unit, now mounted on a shoulder plate. The drone was wasting energy flying around independently. By mounting it here and linking it to our neural interface, we get faster target acquisition and better energy efficiency. Plus, he added with a grin, "it looks badass." "Badass?" I queried, my translation module struggling with the term. "Yeah, you know, like Predator, the movie." Seeing my confusion, he sighed. "We're going to need to set up a cultural exchange program along with the military training." That was just the beginning. Within months, humans had redesigned our combat armor to better suit their physiology, modified our training protocols to emphasize their natural creativity and adaptability, and even started suggesting tactical improvements to fleet formations that had remained unchanged for centuries. The High Council was initially pleased. The human modifications were indeed effective, and their enthusiasm for combat training exceeded expectations. But I saw what the Council did not. The humans weren't just becoming our warriors, they were becoming integrated into every aspect of imperial society. Human diplomats began studying Nikhil political structures and suggesting reforms. Human scientists collaborated with our researchers, bringing fresh perspectives to long stagnant fields. Human artists introduced their music, literature, and visual arts to alien audiences, creating unexpected cultural fusions. And human merchants began exploring economic opportunities throughout the empire, establishing trade networks and business ventures with remarkable speed. "This isn't what we intended," Administrator Vexen Noor confided to me after a particularly heated council meeting. "They were supposed to be our soldiers, not our everything." "I warned you," I replied, feeling no satisfaction in being proven right. Humans don't compartmentalize, they expand into every available space, like water finding its level. That's what makes them dangerous and valuable. The situation came to a head when the first joint human Nikhil fleet engaged a Keth battle group in the disputed Coriolis sector. The combined force performed brilliantly, utilizing human tactical innovations alongside Nikhil technology to decisively defeat the Keth vessels with minimal casualties. But during the battle debrief, human captain Elena Martinez didn't just report on the engagement. She questioned the entire conflict. "Why exactly are we fighting the Keth?" she asked the assembled Nikhil commanders. "Have we attempted meaningful diplomatic outreach? What are their actual demands? Is there room for negotiation?" The Nikhil officers were stunned into silence. For generations, the conflict with the Keth had been accepted as inevitable and perpetual. No one questioned its underlying causes or sought resolution beyond military victory. "The Keth are aggressive expansionists," General Zurix finally replied. "Negotiation is impossible. Have you tried recently?" Captain Martinez pressed. "Because from the combat data, I'm seeing a defensive posture in their fleet positioning, not an offensive one. Their weapons technology hasn't advanced significantly in the last 3 cycles, which suggests they might be reaching the limits of their military capability. That's often when species become open to diplomatic solutions." The human perspective spread through the Nikhil military hierarchy like a virus. Suddenly, assumptions that had gone unchallenged for generations were being questioned. Operations that had been conducted out of tradition were being re-evaluated for effectiveness. And perhaps most disturbing to the High Council, humans were forming relationships, even friendships with members of all Nikhil species,
creating cross-cultural bonds that transcended military hierarchy. I observed these developments with a mixture of fascination and concern. The humans were transforming our society faster than anyone had anticipated, including myself. But whether that transformation would ultimately strengthen or destabilize the empire remained unclear. The answer began to emerge during the Battle of Vega Prime, the largest engagement yet between Nikhil human forces and the Keth Empire. The battle itself was a tactical success, with
human innovations once again proving decisive. But its aftermath revealed just how much had changed. When a crippled Keth battle cruiser sent distress signals after the main engagement, the standard Nikhil protocol would have been to either destroy the vessel or capture its crew for interrogation. Instead, human Commander Jackson ordered rescue operations, providing medical assistance to injured Keth warriors and treating them according to something he called the Geneva Convention, a set of ethical guidelines for warfare that had been established on Earth centuries earlier. The High Council was outraged. "These are our enemies," Councillor Drixian thundered during an emergency session. "Not guests to be coddled." "With respect, Councillor," Commander Jackson responded calmly, "treating prisoners humanely isn't coddling. It's strategic. It shows strength through restraint and opens potential diplomatic channels." Many of those Keth officers were shocked by our treatment. They'd been told we were monsters who would torture and execute them. We proved otherwise. "And why should we care what our enemies think of us?" Drixian demanded. "Because today's enemy might be tomorrow's ally," Jackson replied. "That's been true throughout human history." The debate raged for days, but a surprising development silenced the critics. A Keth delegation requested a diplomatic meeting, the first in over 300 cycles of conflict. Their representatives had been informed of the unusual treatment their captured warriors had received and wished to discuss potential terms for a ceasefire. The peace negotiations were difficult and protracted, with millennia of hostility to overcome, but they progressed, largely due to human diplomatic techniques that emphasized finding mutual interests rather than focusing solely on differences. The humans understood something that both the Nikhil and Keth had forgotten, that perpetual conflict served neither side's long-term interests. Within a galactic year, the unthinkable had occurred: a formal peace treaty between the Nikhil and Keth empires, establishing clear boundaries, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. The conflict that had defined imperial policy for generations had ended not through decisive military victory, but through a combination of strength and diplomacy that the humans called peace through strength. The High Council was forced to re-evaluate its entire approach to the human integration. What had begun as a simple recruitment of warrior auxiliaries had evolved into something far more profound: a transformation of imperial society itself. "I was wrong about them," Administrator Vexnor admitted to me, as we observed a joint human Nikhil-Keth scientific conference discussing potential collaborative research projects. "They aren't just warriors. They never were," I replied. "That was my point from the beginning. Humans aren't specialized like other species. They contain multitudes. They can be warriors and poets, scientists and artists, diplomats and entrepreneurs, often within the same individual. It's unsettling," Vexnor said. "No species should be so adaptable. Perhaps that's why they survived on their world despite their violent tendencies," I suggested. "They never stopped changing, never stopped questioning, never stopped improving. Even when they nearly destroyed themselves, they found ways to continue." The integration of humans into the Nikhil Empire continued at an accelerating pace. Human cultural elements, from their music and art to their political ideals and scientific methodologies, spread throughout imperial society. Human businesses established new trade networks that connected previously isolated regions. Human diplomatic initiatives opened relations with species that had long been considered hostile or unimportant. Not all Nikhil citizens welcomed these changes. Conservative factions argued that humans were diluting traditional imperial values and structures. Religious authorities on several worlds declared humans spiritually corrupting. Military traditionalists resented the rapid reorganization of forces along human-inspired lines. Resistance crystallized around Councillor Drixian, who had never fully accepted the peace with the Keth or the expanding human influence. "We invited them to be our sword arm," Drixian declared in fiery speeches across the Empire, "not our brain or our heart. They were meant to serve the Empire, not reshape it in their image." Drixian's rhetoric found fertile ground among those who felt threatened by change, and soon a movement emerged calling for restrictions on human activities and influence. Some extremists even advocated for the complete removal of humans from imperial space, by force if necessary. The crisis came to a head when radical followers of Drixian attempted a coup against the High Council, using a combination of military force and political maneuvering to seize control of key installations across several core worlds. Their manifesto called for the immediate quarantine of all human territories and the gradual purification of Nikhil society from human influence. What the conspirators hadn't anticipated was the depth of integration that had already occurred. The coup faced resistance not just from humans, but from members of all Nikhil species who had come to value human contributions and friendships. Military units refused orders to move against human settlements. Government officials leaked coup plans to human allies. Ordinary citizens protested in the streets of imperial cities. The coup collapsed within days, with minimal bloodshed, another human principle that had taken root in imperial society. Rather than executing the conspirators, as traditional imperial law demanded, they were publicly tried and sentenced to rehabilitation programs designed with human psychological insights. In the aftermath, the High Council underwent its most significant reorganization in thousands of cycles. For the first time, human representatives were formally included